So today I got 7 things I wish I had known about when I started lifting. So the first tip I have today is consistency. We've all heard that consistency is key, and it's true. Like, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I put this one first because it is probably the biggest tip I'd give to any gym beginner. I will say the rest of this list is not in any particular order. But if you don't show up, you're never gonna see results. And honestly, if you show up but barely know what you're doing, you will still eventually see results just from being consistent. That's why it's so important to be consistent. A great way to be consistent is to decide beforehand how many days a week you plan on lifting. So if it's 3 days a week, it's 3 days a week, no skipping. 4 days a week, 4 days a week, and so on. You get it, right? I will say if you're sick, obviously take a day off, whatever. But there really, at least for me, isn't any other days I skip. Now, there's gonna be extenuating circumstances at some point, but when those come up, try and decide, is this a real reason to skip the gym? Or am I just making an excuse so I don't have to go to the gym? The next thing I wanna go over is intensity. You need to be training hard. So for starters, I know a lot of people train to some magic number that they think that's when gains are gonna come. There's no magic number. There's different rep ranges depending on different goals, but there's no magic number you should be training to. You should be training within 1 to 2 reps of failure. And at first, it's probably gonna be a little difficult, but the more you lift, the easier it'll get. And you can also just train to failure. That is what a lot of people will do. So the next thing I wanna go over is time under tension. So if you don't know what that means, that's basically just how long your set is. So your sets should not be fast. So for example, if you're doing let's say, 15 reps of something, your set should not be 15 to 20 seconds. That is way too fast. Ideally, if your goal is hypertrophy or muscle growth, your set should be 40 plus seconds. So make sure you slow down your reps and control the weight. If someone watches you while you're lifting, it should look like you're controlling the weight and actually have control over whatever you're lifting, and not that you're just throwing around weight. Throwing around weight will, I guess, do something, but that's just not what you should be doing. Make sure you have slow, controlled reps where you're controlling the weight, increasing your time under tension. So the next thing is that you can't just constantly keep switching up what you're doing in the gym. If you do that, you're never gonna see growth. I would say give it at least 6 weeks once you implement a new plan or style of training or whatever it is. I'd give it 6 weeks before you even consider switching it up, because I feel like at 6 weeks is when you'll finally start to notice and see if this plan actually works for you. And odds are, whatever the first plan you implement, that's probably not gonna be the perfect one for you, but you're never gonna know until you actually give it time. Because you don't wanna have a perfect plan and then switch off it too fast, because after 2 weeks you didn't notice it. You're never gonna see anything after 2 weeks. So make sure you're not switching it up and you give it some time so you can actually see the progress. Okay, so the next thing I wanna talk about is lifting with proper form instead of just trying to put as much weight on whatever the exercise you're doing is. Now, this is very important because if you don't lift with proper form, you're highly increasing the risk of injury. And if you're injured, then you just can't lift at all. Another reason that you should be lifting with proper form is because proper form allows you to do the movement slower, and that'll increase your time under tension, which will then increase the gains. And honestly, unless you're a power lifter or you just very much care about how much weight you can move in the gym, there just really isn't a reason to be trying to lift as much as you can. For me personally, my goals are hypertrophy and muscle growth. So for me, I just want to use, honestly, the lightest amount of weight I can use that'll allow me to still grow my muscle. And if you're worried about other people in the gym judging you, this is just me personally, but I've never judged someone for not lifting enough. It's more, if anything, if I see someone lifting a relatively heavy weight, I'm like, oh, that's impressive. But I've never judged someone and thought someone was I don't know, bad at going to the gym because they weren't lifting a lot. I don't know, that just seems very weird. Just focus on you. When I'm at the gym, I'm focused on me, that's it. So the first 5 tips I talked about were all things that were directly related to either being in the gym or getting to the gym and things like that. But the next 2 I talk about are more things that are outside of the gym. So the first one is sleep. Sleep is literally one of the most important things if you're trying to make gains. So for starters, honestly, you will just feel so much better. You'll be more motivated. You'll want to go to the gym more. That's honestly just like the baseline reason of why you need good sleep. Another thing is when you're in the gym, that's where you're tearing the muscle, but sleep is where the muscle gets repaired. So if you just keep tearing the muscle without the repair, you're not really doing anything. You might see some minimal gains, but like when you start getting good sleep, the gains will massively increase. So now that I explained why we need good sleep, let me quickly explain some ways to get better sleep and about how much sleep you should be getting. So each night you should be trying to get somewhere between 7 to 9 hours of sleep, somewhere in there. For you, you're gonna have to find your own sweet spot. For me, I personally like getting somewhere around like 7.5 to 8. I notice that's when I feel my best. But another thing to take into account is I just said 7 to 9 hours of sleep is what you should be getting. But a lot of people don't realize that even though you think you may have gotten 8 hours of sleep, you probably only got 7. A good rule of thumb is however much time of sleep you think you got, assume you got about an hour less. Because throughout the night, you're gonna wake up, may go to the bathroom, whatever, but sometimes you're gonna wake up and you won't even actually be conscious enough to realize it, but that is time you're awake. That's not time you're getting sleep. So the rule of thumb I like to use is if I was in bed for 8 hours, probably got 7 hours, and if I was in bed for 9 hours, got 8, and so on. You could also use something like your Apple Watch to track your sleep like I do, or I know some people have used like a Whoop, and I'm pretty sure there's many more out there. So you could use something like that as well. Some other tips to help you actually improve your sleep itself is trying to get yourself on a consistent sleep schedule. If you go to bed at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every day, you'll notice that you'll less and less need to like set an alarm for yourself or do something like that. Like it'll just become more natural for your body and you'll get used to this is the time I wake up, this is the time I go to sleep, and your body will just become used to it. And it honestly has made it, for me personally, so much easier to sleep. Now I definitely do deviate on the weekends because I'm sure that was probably a concern that came to your mind is like, what about the weekends when I want to stay up a little later? You can do that, but once you really get into that consistent sleep schedule on the weekends, you're honestly gonna not even be able to sleep in as much. Like I typically wake up at 8:30 and on the weekends, I cannot sleep past 10 at all. So that's another thing that'll help you. There's also some supplements out there. I would recommend like something like magnesium. Something like that will definitely help you with your sleep too. Okay, and my last tip for the day, as I said, this is not gonna be something that happens in the gym. This is another out of the gym tip, is nutrition. Nutrition is literally so important. So I'm gonna start off with the basic rule that if you're watching this, you've probably heard like hundreds of times. The basic rule of thumb is calories in versus calories out. And that it's just the basic rule. Like you can't get around it. If you're trying to put on weight, you need to be eating more calories than you're burning. If you're trying to lose weight, you need to be burning more calories than you're intaking. It is simple as that at a basic level. So first I'm going to talk about bulking. This is where you're trying to put on more muscle mass, put on some size, and you're trying to increase your body weight. So for me, the rule of thumb is I probably like to be in somewhere around like a 300 to 500 calorie surplus. So that means if my body's burning 3,000 calories per day, let's say, I'd want to be eating somewhere around 3,300 to 3,500 calories a day. And in that, you need to be eating at least 0.7 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So that means if you were to weigh 100 pounds, you'd have to eat at least 70 grams of protein. If you were to weigh 200 pounds, that would be 140 grams of protein at a minimum. Personally, I like to do at least a gram per pound of body weight. So for example, right now I weigh about 220 pounds. So for me, I try and eat around 220 grams of protein every single day. That'll allow you to maintain your mass and to build more muscle. Protein is absolutely essential for that. Now let's talk about the other side of it, which would be losing weight. So if you want to lose weight, I would say be somewhere around like a 200 to 400 calorie deficit. So if you're burning, we'll go back to 3,000 calories. If you're burning 3,000 calories a day, you probably want to eat somewhere between 2,800 to 2,600 calories a day. And that's going to allow you to lose weight. Okay, so now for bulking and cutting. Some of you may be thinking, well, if I just ate more than the 3 to 500 or the 2 to 400, or you could do 3 to 500 for cutting as well, but that's a side note. couldn't I just do a more extreme bulker cut? Now you could, but for the bulking case, you're gonna put on more fat than you like. Because when you're bulking, you're putting on fat and muscle, but if you increase the calories too much, you're gonna be putting on way more fat than muscle, which is not the goal. We wanna be putting on muscle. And then while you're cutting, you're gonna start losing muscle and body fat, which you're gonna lose muscle and body fat anyway, but you're gonna start losing more muscle than you need to. Because when you're cutting, the goal is to try and burn as much fat as possible with as little muscle as possible. But the larger you increase the deficit, then the more muscle you're gonna start burning. And then you just defeated the whole purpose of the bulk you probably just went on for a couple months. You're getting rid of all of that muscle you just put on. So we don't wanna do that. Okay, so those are my 7 tips for things that I wish I had known when I started lifting. If you have any questions, comments, or you think I messed something up, drop it down in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for next week's video.